Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at Venus's upcoming square to the planet Uranus. Now, this is a two-part series that I'm doing this week on the T-square that's forming between Venus, Saturn, and Uranus. Last week, it was Mars who was completing this T-square. And after this T-square is complete, Venus will conjoin with Mars. So we'll be following up on that later. Um, it's quite a sequence. I had it at the very beginning of the year when I do my year ahead forecast for the entirety of 2021. I had the sequence highlighted as one of the major transits of the summertime in the northern hemisphere. And the main reason that I have it highlighted is because one T square is a lot, but two back to back, followed by a conjunction of Venus and Mars, is really significant. There's some things that are really getting ironed out during this process. I mean, Mars going through the T square with these three planets can be a little bit more challenging. Venus coming through can be a little bit more reorienting. And then the reorientation coming on the heels of the challenge results in a kind of synthesis. That's what I see the process. That's how I see the process overall. And I'll be talking more about that when we get to Venus's upcoming conjunction with Mars. But in the meantime, I just want to talk about Venus and Uranus today. So first, I'm going to put it up on the real-time clock, give you guys a look as always, and then I'll go ahead and talk to you about some of the archetypal combinations of the two. So I've talked about Venus and Uranus a bunch in previous videos. I hopefully have some new angles that you've never heard today. But here's Venus making the opposition to Saturn, and then Venus coming into the square to Uranus and Taurus. Now, that's going to happen. The opposition is in the process of happening right now as I'm recording this, but the square will take place by Thursday, July 8th, and pass over by Friday, Saturday. And then by, Sunday into Monday, we're going to see the conjunction between Venus and Mars. So Monday of next week, we'll be talking about that. Okay. So what is there to say about Venus and Uranus? A lot, just like there is a lot to say about Saturn and Venus. First of all, it's a square, not an opposition. So it's important to start off breaking an aspect down by what type of aspect it is, and therefore what type of meeting you'll have between two planets. A square is of the nature of Mars. Why is that? Because when you look at the Thema Mundi and you start from the positions of Cancer and Leo in the zodiac, and you fan out to the right of Leo, to the sun, to the right, and to the left of the moon sign, Cancer, to the left, and get to their square, whole sign square aspects, you get to the signs of Scorpio and Aries. Those two signs are 90 degrees apart from their starting points of Cancer and Leo. And those two signs are both the domiciles, the home temples of Mars, the masculine domicile of Aries and the feminine domicile of Scorpio. So the sun's square to its right lands in a feminine sign. So it's kind of a feminine dynamic. And you can really deeply study the nature of aspects, planets, and signs cohesively when you study them in this way, because essentially what you're saying is that the square has something to do with Mars. Mars has something to do with Scorpio. And the square inherently also has something to do, you could say, between the sun and Mars, or Leo and Scorpio. When you start thinking in that way, when you're studying ancient astrology, the benefit of thinking that way and being trained in that way is that you start to, if you can work in these layers simultaneously, a sign, a whole sign aspect like a square, the nature of a planet involved in a square, you start putting things together and you start being able to see all different kinds of relationships that you might not otherwise see. So similarly with Cancer, you go to the left of Cancer, you get to Aries. So you're going from the left of the feminine domicile, the moon. Moon doesn't have a masculine domicile, but the feminine sign of the moon, Cancer, and you're going to the masculine domicile of Aries, which is ruled by Mars. So in that dynamic, you're looking at the moon as another way of understanding squares, as another way of understanding Mars is to understand its relationship with the moon, and the moon with Mars. This leads into things like dignities. For example, the sun is exalted in Aries, which is Mars's sign, whereas Mars is in its fall in the sign of Cancer, which is the moon sign. The moon is in its fall in Scorpio, which is Mars's sign, and so on and so forth, like that. So it's a one of the things that I love about ancient astrology is that it's like the patterns on the back of a snake, or the amazing designs that you find in like nature and like seashells or something. So at any rate, enough of me waxing on poetic here. Squares are of the nature of Mars. So Venus and Uranus are meeting this week through a Mars like dynamic, which means hostile, confrontational. It can mean that there are, um, more like edgy themes, but also action oriented themes, changes that occur because of decisive actions that are taking place or that are being motivated to take place. So confrontation and action, the will, courage, determination, perseverance, and also actions that come because of those qualities or because of things like impatience, irritability, and impulsiveness. So when you know that the relationship between two archetypes is being fueled by this type of relationship, then you know that it's not just Venus, it's not like a Venus Uranus conjunction where the two are going to blend more seamlessly. So all of the themes that I mentioned today are going to be a little bit more, they're going to be relating to one another in terms of a more dynamic tension, conflict, or orientation toward action. Okay, so we've the goddess, love, beauty, harmony, friendship, agreement, sensuality, pleasure, anything that's enjoyable, creative, colorful, harmonious. And then you have Uranus. Uranus is a god of breakthroughs and revolution, suddenness, strange, unusual, outside of the box, eccentric, disruptive, also very fast and sort of can be kind of like hot headed. And revolution is sometimes very bloody, as we know. So you have all of the reckless and puer like qualities of Uranus, the one that like Icarus flying too high, getting flying too high and the wings burn and he crashes down to the ocean. So Uranus will be revolutionary, rebellious, but sometimes reckless, uncontrolled, wild, and erratic. So let's put them together in a sort of contentious, or action oriented dynamic. You're likely to experience breakthroughs. And by breakthroughs, I mean sudden, fast, unexpected, surprising, but perhaps liberating experiences of breakthrough in love, in sex, in relationships, in friendships. And that can be like a rain cloud splitting open. So relieving, so nice to feel that surge of pent up energies. Of course, it can lead to some pretty erotic and experimental things in sexuality, love, relationships, whether it's experimental drugs for having fun, experimental positions when making love, experimenting with different partners or different sexual orientations or lifestyles. These kinds of things often happen, as well as cosmetic surgeries, altering or choosing like a midlife crisis. It's like, okay, I'm having my midlife crisis. I'm gonna go and get a boob job or whatever the case. I'm just, no offense to anyone, just everyone. Venus Uranus is that need to suddenly shake things up with your style or your appearance. Sometimes it could be a description of someone having a surgery to feel more comfortable in the expression of their gender or their sexuality or something like that. I think they're called transition surgeries. It could be something that someone is doing to be deliberately provocative, like wearing a funny costume to work, or I'm just making this up, but finding something that's sort of perverse or unusual to be attractive or desirable. Can also be like a taste for things that are strange or unusual, almost like some of the artists that come to my mind. I'm trying to remember the name of the director who did the movie Pan's Labyrinth. Do you guys remember the name of that director? Who was it? I can't remember. I know someone out there will know it, so please feel free to put it in the comments section. where there's this kind of dark, unusual, but very beautiful aesthetic. I find that's how I find Pan's Labyrinth anyway. And he's done other movies too, the director of that one, or like, Tim Burton. He's another good example of like Venus Uranus stuff. And I think he even has a Venus Uranus aspect in his chart somewhere. Might be wrong about that. I can't remember. Whatever the latest, most advanced science is that helps you to prevent against aging, this would be very Venus Uranus. Avant-garde art, things that make statements through beauty about what progress can or should be. An award-winning film, a speech at the Oscars that is political and artistic at once. Anything that would be a inventive, forward-thinking, but also provocative, strange, or unusual statement in art, music, design, dress, style, image, photography. Anything that would be considered rebellious within a relationship. I just need to be free. I just need to drive really fast and let dad take care of the kids for the for the night. I can hear my wife saying something like that. Anything that's kind of electric, eclectic, spacey, unusual. I think of David Bowie, always with Venus Uranus. Here's one I was thinking of when I was writing down my notes. So where it's kind of like, is it creative and unusual and like interesting, or is it just kind of like maybe kind of perverted somehow? Like, I'll never forget when I was a kid that I always felt that way about the show Pee-wee's Playhouse. Do you guys remember Pee-wee's Playhouse? Okay, so I always used to feel that way about that show. I always used to be like, I just think there's something wrong with this. Mostly just kind of, he was just so weird. I remember specific. There's a comment that my dad made, and it's such a dad comment. But when Pee Wee Herman ended up getting in trouble for whatever he did, I don't even know what it was, but he did something sexually inappropriate, and it was like scandalous or whatever. My dad goes, I remember when I very specifically as a kid, because my dad was a preacher and he didn't usually say anything that was like, he didn't criticize people. And he just like sat back in his chair. And I remember we were sitting at the dinner table and he goes, well, I don't know who didn't see that coming. And I always thought it was so funny because I wasn't conscious of the fact that as a kid, I also thought that the show and him were just like really weird. Anyway, no judgment against Pee-wee or Pee-wee fans. I actually still like it was funny. One of my early dates that my wife and I went on, just randomly, I guess we didn't go anywhere. We were at home, but we decided to watch the movie Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And it was like just this weird and funny, but anyway, so enough of Pee-wee Herman. Anything that would be like the latest in 3D cinematography, like, oh, you've got a new 3D TV, or you've got anything that new gaming, new graphics processors, aesthetic, but like technologically advanced. Also, things that go wrong that end up like an attempt to look good or appear good, but it ends up warping or distorting, like sort of you went to get a surgery, but you look like Frankenstein. Like that kind of thing can happen with Venus here. I feel like it's a little bit of a risky time to get a tattoo, for example, but I've seen lots of people make drastic shifts in style that are well timed, and they're just provocative and interesting and not necessarily ugly or like not well done or something. So it's kind of like hard to predict on that one. The idea that like a beauty lives forever, my beauty will never die, this kind of youthful Puella, Peter Pan meets like a fashion designer. Sudden shifts or styles, your wardrobe, these are all kind of mundane, but if you're stuck in certain kinds of relationship patterns, people always ask me, they're like, I've always been in this pattern. I get into the same pattern all the time in relationships. Do you see anything coming where like the pattern might change and I might meet someone who's different? I'm always like, Venus Uranus. And it's probably not the person you meet under the Venus Uranus dynamic. It's what they open up in you. It's like, I'm going to go salsa dancing and I might meet some really attractive man while salsa dancing, and he's not the committing type, but he's a great dancer, and he just completely rocks my world for a couple of nights, and then I never see him again. But God, I just realized I need to be dating different kinds of people. I have heard that exact story in my client counseling. I feel like, for 10 years, every year I hear that story probably at least 40 or 50 times with Venus Uranus. So, or and it can go in, it can go in reverse as well. Obviously, sometimes it's going to be like, let's say, I don't have a lot of male clients, but in some of the men that I've had with Venus Uranus dynamics, it'll be like I'm suddenly inspired to share or express my feelings, my emotions, my sexuality in different ways, and it's creating this breakthrough in my partnership. On the other hand, like if you're single, it can be a great one for fun. It's like Venus Uranus to me is like popping a champagne bottle. It's kind of like, ooh, this is fun, but like you don't do it very often, and you can't live in the sort of like top penthouse tower of sexual experiences for very long. So Venus Uranus, gotta love it. Okay, here's one thing that I don't like about Venus Uranus, or I shouldn't say I don't like it. It's just you see it, and you know, I, well, here's how I would express it. I see it on my Instagram feed a lot, and I feel like it's one of those things where Venus Uranus is. It's kind of like Venus Uranus dark side. People who get into like self empowerment, sovereign, sort of sexual power culty dynamics. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against self empowerment, feeling good about yourself, taking care of yourself, doing healing work, doing important transformational work, connecting with divinity in ways that are empowering, especially over the feeling of being afraid, feeling like you have more agency to overcome bad habits. So I like those words when they're used in the right way. This is, if you can imagine this is kind of like it's kind of like I'm empowered, and I also hope that you'll give me 3,000 likes because of how good I look and how sexually satisfying I look in my pictures, or how strong and muscular I look for guys, and like how liberated I am, or what. It's like when people start getting that sense of like, look at me, I'm sexy, I'm free, I'm powerful, I'm sovereign. It's like it's just tinged with this glaze of hubris. You have to be very careful of that with Venus Uranus. Obviously, I love it when people feel good about themselves. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't, but all of you out there, you probably know the difference between tasteful sharing of things that have empowered you, or feeling good, or looking good. And I think we should celebrate that. But sometimes it just gets into like, oh, I feel a little molested by your Instagram feed. All right. Anyway, enough out of me. You can feel the irreverence in me today. Venus Uranus, busted. Burning Man. Just going to leave that hanging out there for a minute. Burning Man. Peacock displays, gold rushes, people rushing. I watched a movie a couple of weeks ago called, what was it called? The Secret of the Sierra Madres, or something like that. It was an old Humphrey Bogart movie. And for whatever reason, I was feeling nostalgic. My grandpa used to watch these kinds of movies, and I decided I would watch a Humphrey Bogart movie. And it was about people becoming mad for gold. Gold rush. It's like gold fever. I feel like a little bit right now, we're in a similar moment with some of these cryptocurrencies. I feel like what I witness sometimes on social media is like the equivalent of what happens to Humphrey Bogart in that film. If you've never seen it, he just sort of starts going mad. And I'm not saying I'm not making a judgment, but you certainly, if there's people out there who have who have gone a little gold mad with Uranus and Taurus. Interestingly, when I was in Mayapur, which is like a pilgrimage site for Bhakti yoga, um, I was there was a huge festival going on. I was told this story under a Venus Uranus transit a few years ago. If some of you watch my channel long enough, um, and there were these huge. There's these Panchatattva deities in the temple in Mayapur, which are sacred to bhaktas, and they have this huge Abhishek festival where the deities get bathed in like yogurt and honey and ghee and Ganges water. And so at any rate, there was such a huge crowd, and the crowd was like they opened the gates, and the crowd, you weren't supposed to go in unless you had like a ticket or something. Otherwise, there was like a different place to be and a different line. And this crowd just didn't respect it. They just rushed. And I was caught up in the crowd and like pulled along with it. And I was excited at first because I was like, the rules had broken down and I was going to get to be really close to the deities. And that was pretty cool for such a big festival, kind of like getting close to like I don't know, the stage in like a big concert or something. And then I saw like people who, like women and children and other people who were getting kind of like not crushed or like stampeded or anything that dramatic, but like basically they were being bulldozed by this rush to be as close to these massive, deities as possible. And I just had this moment where I go, oh my God, it's Venus. And I can't remember if it was an opposition or a square conjunction or what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was a square. If I think about it a little bit. Yeah, it would have been a square. Venus would have been in Aquarius, I believe, because it was during the winter. So everyone, and I was like, oh my God, it's Venus square Uranus. It's gold, it's lust. It's just lust. And I thought, wow, I have to get away. So I like squeezed my way out of the crowd and I stood at the back, just kind of quietly from a long distance away, not being able to see the deities very well, enjoyed a prayerful experience while the rest of the crowd ended up having to be dispatched and they had to like get the whole thing under control. And I had this moment where I realized like I had been caught up in this divine fever lust. And it was really powerful for me because it was a moment where I realized that there's really anything in this world, whether it's these sacred deities in a temple, it's really supposed to be pointing us to the transcendental source of all things, to our heart and soul, to compassion, like, but people were treating it like it was like a Pantera concert or something. People are like, there's like like a spiritual mosh pit. So, and I just, it was one of, you've probably heard the phrase spiritual materialism before. And it was something like that. It was like even our spiritual ideals can be something that we rush toward with a kind of feverish quality. It's the same thing that can happen in the psychedelic world. Like I directed the ayahuasca monologues for a number of years and, helped different, some celebrities, in fact, like craft their stories about ayahuasca to tell on the stage. And, I told some myself and I remember that people would come to this show, which was held at Webster Hall in kind of like like Lower East Side, not far from Union Square in New York City. And afterward, people, would come up to us, some of the speakers or directors or whatever, and they would be like, well, where can I do this? Where can I go and do ayahuasca? Like they were like so jacked up about it. Over time, and I would help people like try to help them mindfully approach the experience in the right way, as much as I could be like a mindful steward of the experience. But I realized after a while that there was a gold rush that was happening in terms of going to South America, and in sometimes like exploiting people were getting exploited, people were getting used, money was. So that happens in spiritual communities, whether it's yoga or. The other thing that can be there, though, on the flip side, is this almost intolerance. Once people think, oh, there's some fakeness here. There's some vanity. There's some lust. There's some, there, you know, people are doing yoga just to look good. Don't tell me because I see your $90 Lululemon pants. I know you, it's like, or whatever the case might be. And I think that there's an equal urge with Venus Uranus sometimes to get a little puritanical. Well, I reject it unless it's the real thing. Like when I was a kid, the equivalent of this would be like my best friend's older brother was fantastically cool. He was into cool music. Like, my friends were as far as they could go was what the radio provided. So maybe alternative music that'd be like, I don't know, Pearl Jam and Weezer and whatever like cool alternative music was maybe on the radio. No, he was getting me into like through my friend, his older brother was getting us into like the Replacements, bands that were, I mean, there were so many that I just don't want to like sound like some weird, but before when it was back then, it was like, oh, you're into indie rock. Well, which bands can you name and how obscure and good are they? And like, that was kind of like a badge that you wore, like, oh yeah, are you into this band? And oh, you are? Oh, okay. It's like if you, and the more obscure kind of the better. That can be very Venus Uranus. Like, I'm too good for anything mainstream. It's got to be alternative. And similarly, sometimes we reject whether it's religion or faith or um, we reject people and we reject all sorts of things because we're like, well, it's not quite hip enough or it's not quite real enough or whatever the case might be. And the exclusivity of Venus Saturn and Venus Uranus that we're dealing with this week can um there's a lot of beauty in being able to compromise and being able to um get comfortable with the selfish spots, not to overlook them, but to be graceful. If we want grace for ourselves, we have to give it to others. So be careful with Venus Uranus and the high, impossible, lofty. Remember, Uranus is like a sky god. It's like, Venus and this Venus is taken to outer space. You know what I mean? That's why, you know, David Bowie, the ground, what's the song? Ground Control, Major Tom. I forget the name of the song. This baby, that spacey environment gets us feeling like, I have sensational cosmic taste. You know what I mean? So just be careful of that. Images being defiled or broken, iconoclasm, when temples, libraries are burned, when books are burned, out of some kind of puritanical impulse. The way that something suddenly ugly becomes beautiful. I remember I never really liked coffee until I went to Costa Rica with my wife. Oh, by the way, that was an interesting experience because when we were there were some Venus Uranus dynamics going on and there were earthquakes. In this tropical, beautiful vacation environment, it was disrupted by earthquakes while we were there. But anyway, I met some people who had this beautiful love affair with coffee and it rubbed off on me. So we can change our taste, we can change our style, we can change what we like or don't like. And it can happen pretty suddenly when Venus squares Uranus. Images being defiled or broken, a sacred statue being thrown down, or, in the case of some of what we've seen in the news over the year, like, okay, we're going to the courthouse and, we're going to take down an old flag, or we're going to, like certain things that people for political reasons will pull down, or they'll make a statement about something and we're taking away the Confederate flag from this location, or, stuff. Very Venus Uranus. The resistance to any kind of conformed way of being in relationships, feminism, LGBTQ, different genders, sexual orientations coming out of the closet, any kind of unique sexual healing or sexual experience or expression, questions about what defines femininity or women or different expressions of femininity, in any direction, the shakeup of Venusian norms in any area of our life. So that's what I've got for today. Hope that this was an interesting exploration for you of Venus Uranus. I hope that you find these videos useful as archives as well, because then, in time, you can really come back to listen to these anytime. And when you have a Venus Uranus transit in your life, your chart, you're born with one, or you're reading someone's chart who's born with one, just hearing these archetypal explorations can get the wheels turning. The heavens are always turning. If we want to be able to see the turning of the heavens reflected in our lives, we need to turn the archetypes over and over in different images, phrases, lessons, insights, and you have to do it regularly. And then you'll start seeing and noticing it everywhere. Okay, well, that's what I've got for you guys today. Leave your comments in the comments section below. If you want to add a story, put hashtag grabbed and tell us how you've been, tell us how the planets have seized your consciousness or how you've been relating with them. And probably aggregate some stories later in the week. All right, take it easy, everyone.